it would be horrible for you to purchase a property and without a survey to find out later on that the home is not even built in the building envelope, and the HOA is going to have an issue with it. Maybe a neighbor, your house blocked their view, and they have a claim to the fact that your house should have never been built in that specific area. I mean, guys, there's countless things that could happen. Hey everybody, welcome back to Buying a Home. I'm Joe Maez with the Maez Group.
Omar Neshwa, welcome back, folks.
Excellent, guys. So last week in episode 6, we talked about a form of an inspection that's called the appraisal. This week in episode 7, we're going to jump into another inspection, another contingency, which is the survey, guys. And so there's different types of surveys. Because we're going to stick on residential purchase right now, we're not talking about commercial. We're talking about residential purchase, a home, a townhome, a condo. We're going to talk about those types of surveys and the different surveys that you can order to ensure that you're getting the property that you're purchasing. And guys, surveys are super important. Buying a property without a survey is a huge no-no. It happens sometimes, it can happen quite a bit, especially if the seller can provide you with a current copy of a survey that's acceptable to the title company. Absolutely. That can happen. But we're going to talk about 2 different surveys today and some things that you need to look out that's super important. All right. So the first type of survey we're going to talk about is the one that's least used in our market, and that's called the stake survey. And the stake survey is probably a more expensive survey.
It has nothing to do with ribeyes, though.
No ribeyes, no New York strip. The stake is an actual stake that's in the ground. And what are the costs associated with that, with the stake survey, Amar?
So on a typical purchase agreement, we see a lot of the surveys go as a seller-sided item, and they can range anywhere from $200 up to $1,000 or more in some cases, especially on large parcels.
Yeah, it just depends. So a stake survey, guys, is going to be used more when you're purchasing a big piece of property, and maybe it's in a more of a rural setting. So in our market, in Albuquerque's market, it'd be kind of East Mountains, Jemez, down in Belen, Los Lunas, in the North Valley on larger parcels. And here's the reason why. A stake survey is very important because it really outlines the boundaries of your property. You've heard it time and time again, especially ranches, larger ranches, ranchettes, where fences are not in the exact places that they're supposed to be. What are some other things that you see on stake surveys?
On stake surveys, we see a lot of the farmland, especially, that people say, you know what, that's mine. No, that's yours. No, that's mine. And you really want to distinguish what's yours and what's the neighbor's property, because you can't tell by the naked eye unless you actually have a professional go out there and stake it.
That's right. The whole thing, guys, is talking about professionals. The other things that you're going to note that you may not see with the naked eye are going to be easements. Certain easements that could run through your property that grant other people access to your property. Also, is your property landlocked? Do you want to know that you can actually gain access to your property that you're purchasing? There's been a lot of times, are there shared driveways? Different things that you may not see as you're walking onto the property, where your utilities are at. You may think there's utilities on property, and when in fact, once you get your survey, you find out there's not.
Absolutely.
Utilities.
We've seen it on loans a lot where you might be okay with a shared driveway, but the lender may not. I mean, it's all going to depend on how it's faced on a survey.
So let's talk about this, things that you may not see on a stake survey. Maybe through the middle of your property runs this easement. It's a public utility easement, but there's nothing there. Maybe overhead, power lines can be run there futuristically because the local utility has an easement to run something through there. Or maybe there's a underground pipeline that's through there that you don't know about, that you can't even dig or put a permanent structure in that. Guys, so many, and again, you can reach out to us and ask specific questions. We have professional surveyors that we could even put you in touch with. But this is one of the inspections that we're going to in our opinion, point you towards.
Absolutely.
If you're purchasing something of a larger, an acre, half acre, or better, right? It's just in your best interest. The next type of survey that we want to talk about is going to be pretty much the more acceptable one here, especially in subdivisions like Ventana Ranch, Cabazon, places where walls have been, they're called platted subdivisions. And that's called the ILR. So the ILR stands for Improvement Location Report. And that's pretty acceptable here in Albuquerque and the surrounding metro area. So talk to us about the ILR.
So a lot of times a lender will require the ILR to be approved through the title company. And if there isn't one available, or if it's gone lost or missing, the title company will be responsible for ordering a brand new one for us. So on a typical ILR, we want to see the boundaries of the home, the surrounding area, if there's a new pool that was built, if there's a pergola that's been put up in the most recent years. In most cases, you will need a brand new one, even if you do have the old one, if there's anything that's visible on a map that shows something was built on that property.
Now, it's super important, and the lender is going to require that document because there are some things that are known as encroachments, and this goes for stake survey and the ILR. But let's talk about the ILR specifically. What are some items that you'll find on an ILR are your corners, where your walls are at, where the structure is at, any outbuildings, if there's a shed, if there's a patio, right? It's going to show pools. It's going to show setbacks. So when you're building a house, there's certain setbacks from the back of the property, the front of the property, also the sides of the property. The house, the structures can only be within a certain area. Okay. In certain custom home communities, there's building envelopes. Okay, to where there's a build pad that's been deed restricted to where a house can only be built on a certain building envelope.
Absolutely.
And you want to know that you're meeting those requirements because, it would be horrible for you to purchase a property and come to find out later on, and without a survey, to find out later on that the home is not even built in the building envelope, and the HOA is going to have an issue with it. Maybe a neighbor, your house blocked their view, and they have a claim to the fact that your house should have never been built in that specific area. I mean, guys, there's countless things that could happen. We've seen where certain structures are built without permits, and they're actually in an area where a structure cannot be built. And that structure, you're going to have to, if a lender comes to a lender's attention, how can that affect their loan?
Oh, it could affect their loan dramatically. I mean, we can get to the point where we want clarity from the title company, the seller, and if we don't have that clarity on these encroachments or easements or anything that's different or indifferent on the actual survey, this thing can not close in some cases.
Yeah, public utility easements are normal. They'll show where your utilities are at. What are some common things so let's just say there's an encroachment, and give an example of some encroachments that you see.
I've seen neighbors build walls on a property that you're purchasing, or you building a wall on a neighbor's property. That's considered a pretty serious encroachment nowadays.
Okay, so it could be an inch, it could be 6 inches, your walls on somebody else's property. What needs to happen going forward in order for that to happen, for things to go forward?
We've seen approvals that the neighbor applied, and we've seen people knock down walls and redo them in some cases. I mean, it can get pretty expensive pretty quick if you have to go that route, but a lot of people want to keep their property in their lines.
Let's talk about other things with public utility easements, and this is just something that I've seen in my time. Somebody builds a shed, right? And it's 6 inches onto a public utility easement, meaning, there's an underground utility line that runs, over this shed by 6 inches. What's something that the buyer might be required to get, or the seller might be required to get in order to move forward? It's an encroachment agreement.
Yeah.
An encroachment agreement. Okay. Without that encroachment agreement, the next you, the buyer, are going to have an issue with that going forward, and it could cost you the sale of your property down the road.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. And we've also seen it at the closing table with title companies sharing with the borrowers that, hey, you have an easement here and an easement here. And if PNM or New Mexico Gas needed to come on your property and work on that, they have every right to do so.
They have every right to do it. So that's just a few things about surveys, guys. And of course, there's so much that we can go over and talk to you about with respect to surveys. The survey happens normally about 3/4 of the way through the transaction. It's ordered right away that first week, and I think that was episode, I forget what episode that was, but it's ordered during that first week of escrow. Okay, but it could take until maybe the third week of the transaction to be done because surveyors are out there. It is a contingency. It is something that you should look at as a buyer and really review your documents. Don't just be signing things that are sent to you. You should be reviewing these things and looking things over. If there is an encroachment, you should do your due diligence and really read into it and see exactly what the encroachment is. Ask a lot of questions. All right. So something that you really need to look into. Now, in platted subdivisions, there's really a lot less encroachments and issues just because people stay within the line, so to speak. But when people are building on covered patios or adding garages on, or there's been a remodel to a property, that's when I think you really need to start looking at the survey just a little bit better. Anything you want to add?
I'd also wanted to add on refinance properties, which we do a lot of refinances when people see improvements in rates or if they want to cash out. We always like going through their old closing packages and finding old surveys because a lot of times those are reusable and it saves the borrower a few $100s.
So yes, and so now for the cost of that ILR, normally they're between $250 to about $350, $400, depending on the property. But if you save that document, guys, if you ever go to sell that property, that's going to save, because most of the time the buyers are going to ask, again, just telling you about 2023 norms. Most of the time the buyer is going to ask the seller to pay for a survey. Now that's completely negotiable, I got to say that, but it sure does save you a lot of time, especially if the title company is going to insure over that ILR. So just some tips and tricks for you guys. That's going to cover inspections of the survey portion. If you guys have any questions, you can always reach out to us and we can go a little bit more in depth with you on that. So guys, this is episode number 7 of survey. We've gone over the different types of encroachments. We've gone over the 2 different types of surveys and which ones are normally used for certain things.
Easements and costs of surveys and why it's important to have one, why it's important to review it. Those are going to be really things that you want to talk to your professional agent about.
All right, so we've gone over all that. So next week in episode number 8, we're going to be going over the week of closing and things that we think you should be looking out for and things you need to do. So we've already gone through all these inspections. We've done appraisals. We've done the survey. You work with the lender. Now that week of closing is a really crucial point in your home buying experience. And we want to save you a lot of time and prep you so that way you don't learn the hard lessons the way a lot of people learn them out there. So that's episode 7. We hope you learned a lot and we're looking forward to seeing you next week for episode number 8. Have a great week.
Thank you.